Welcome to everyone who is with us and watching live now, and welcome to everyone who will be watching this at a later date via YouTube, and thank you for your interest. So I'm Anna McNay and I can't speak. And I'm an art writer, editor and curator, and today I'm very pleased to be here with the artist, curator and lecturer Mindy Lee. We spoke the other day in preparation for this, and she said that she's been sending me invites to her exhibitions for nearly a decade now, and that was actually our first time connecting. So A, I feel really guilty for that. B, I'm really grateful to well, not grateful for the pandemic, but grateful to what it's enabled with virtual connections and Zoom, and that we're able to do this today. And grateful that so many of you can in fact be here with us. So we have quite a lot of topics that we're hoping to touch upon, all of which are central to Mindy's practice. These include autobiography and motherhood's private domestic routines and rituals, responsive parenting informing responsive painting, cloth as a precious keepsake and a second skin, holding memories of our past, our inner and outer selves and our ghosts versus the viscerality of our actual bodies, shifting identities, transient moments and tipping points as we come together and pull apart through love and loss, cycles of repetitive behaviour, moving from daily interactions to cross-generational roles, death, bereavement and recollection, and finding our own roots and shoots. I have to say those were Mindy's words, not mine, so it sounds good, doesn't it? But yeah. Screen sharing some slides as we talk, so obviously of Mindy's work. And we aim to talk for approximately, this is always approximate, but 45 to 50 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions at the end. I'm afraid I've muted everybody. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Zoom etiquette by now, but it does help with the sound quality. So I would ask that if anyone has questions whilst we're talking, if you could type them into the chat box, which again, I'm sure you know this, but it's kind of bottom middle of your screens. And then I'll read them from there at the end, because that's just generally easier than unmuting. And also I'm a control freak. So just to make you aware, as I've mentioned, this is being recorded and it will be shared afterwards on the Blyth Arts YouTube channel, and the talk is also being supported by the Blyth Centre for Music and Arts at Imperial College in London. So as I've said, we've got lots to cover, so I want to get to the conversation as soon as possible, but just to give a very brief introduction to anyone who doesn't know who Mindy is, despite being able to see her on the screen. She graduated from the Royal College of Art in 2004 with an MA in painting, was shortlisted for the WW Solo Award in 2015, and is currently the head of art at the Blyth Centre for Music and Arts at Imperial College. And she's exhibited extensively in London and abroad, but I think the rest is going to come out in this conversation. So, and I've forgotten to screen share, but anyhow, let me do that now. Start. So yes, first of all, welcome, Mindy.
Thank you very much. Here I am.
Thank you for asking me to talk to you today. So,
thank you for doing it. It's nice to see you.
And you. Yeah. Okay, so just forget everybody else for now. But yeah, so these first images here are works that you say you keep coming back to as being kind of central to your work. So I think they're a good starting point, because you can maybe then talk a bit about some of the key points. So first of all, can you explain a little bit about your practice? And you say that you collaborate. Sorry, maybe you don't want the inverted commas. Collaborate with your son Jacob, who's now 6.5, but you've been doing so since he was about 6 months old.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You can explain how and why that started, and how can you collaborate with an infant or a child?
Yeah. So when I finished on work in the studio and work at work, and I came home and had my son, everything shifted, obviously, as my world became very small into a very intimate domestic bubble, and all my attention came on this small baby that I needed to look after. And so I felt like the work, I was shifting very much as a person, and the work needed to shift as well. And I previously made work that had an undercurrent of autobiography to it, and I thought this was a good opportunity to shift my working practice and be a bit brave and make the work directly autobiographical. And when he was about 6 months old, I was really missing painting. So I'd not been able to do any for that period of time. And I thought, let's just get the paper out, give him my paints and see what happens. And so we had this messy play day of him crawling around on the paper and, you know, making these crazy things. And then when he went to bed, I looked at them and I thought, oh, these are really interesting. They're really exciting. It's a different kind of mark that I would make and I couldn't make. And I love them. And I want to work with them and make something in response to them and maybe mimic some of his gestures, some of these weird colours he'd mixed together, pick up on some of his palette and work around them. So the first attempts I did were working around his marks on the paper. So it grew as a practice from there. And because I was working as in responsive parenting, so adapting every day to the changing needs and abilities of my son, this kind of adapting and working around his marks seemed really natural in the painting. So that's where this mode of practice of making work came from. And I have it down as a collaboration because we're involved in the same narrative, and he's very much starting the work. And to just not acknowledge that he's a vital part of the work seemed really rude. So I've added his name to my name for this series of work to say this was made by both of us. And he started the work and then I finished the paintings by working around them.
You use his initials though, you call him JALB rather
than,
is that an anonymity thing or is it like an artistic moniker?
It was for an anonymity really to start with, because I'm taking a lot of liberties with our private life and his image and then his marks as well. And I thought if he grows up and he's not interested in this at all, that's just, you know, that's too much. So if he at any point doesn't want to be connected directly, then he's free to be left partially anonymous.
You'll have to take down the YouTube video talking about
I will.
But so these works here, which are from 3 years ago, this is on a bed sheet. Can you talk a bit about when and why you started working on cloth like this and what the significance of it is? We'll see, as we go through the slides, you worked on lots of different types of quite special familial cloth. Yeah.
So as it was coming, my studio moved home and the work's evolving from this domestic space, and I thought the surface I'm working on as well should be from a domestic space, and the clothes, the bedding, and the different fabrics I work on have all got a direct family connection. So this was my bed sheet, and it's got that history of the body's activity and like daily wear and tear. And it gets softer and softer as it's slept on every day as well. So for me, it's got a lot of charged narrative already before I even start working on the painting. And then the painting surface for me is like a skin, and then the fabric is a second skin to the body. So it seemed like a good plan to use these fabrics that were personal to me. And in this painting, Jacob's also holding fabric that's super personal to him, his comfort blanket, as a transitional object for him to get used to being away from me, and using it in lieu of my presence. So when I'm absent, the blanket is a good substitute for me. And I used to have a comfort blanket as well. And I think I still do this with fabric. So I use it as a substitute for a presence. So when something is absent, it can be kind of re-brought back to a present through the fabrics. So that could be either another person or a previous self as well. Yeah.
So presence and absence is quite relevant with these slightly freaky Victorian photographs that you put in. Can you talk a bit about what these are? They look like death photography, but they're not. Explain what they are and how they've influenced you, perhaps.
So I first saw these, and I was looking at Victorian photography and how the Victorians take photographs of the dead to remember them, so they look alive but they aren't alive, and as a memento mori. And I thought these were memento mori as well, and they were really weird. And then I thought, well, maybe the mother and child aren't allowed to be in the same present state if one is alive and one is dead, so perhaps it's a mark of respect, the blanket, to the dead. And then I looked again, and it's like, no, the children are very much alive. And this one's the one on the left's moving her hand around, and then I've looked into it some more, and it's just a logistically practical thing of them having their heads held still, so they can get an in focus photograph of the children, because the exposure is like 30 seconds to a minute. But I was still left with that creeped out thing of having seen them. And then I think the photographs are supposed to be cropped in, so you don't see the mother at all. Mm-hmm. But the mother as a support, an invisible support system, or furniture, or part of the house, part of the architecture, really interested me, that she's always in the background or cut off from an image, or the shadow in an image when the child's being documented. And so I think that kind of really played out through the work as well.
Is that how you feel, kind of like the invisible support?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So again, we're coming back to clothing, and these were actually, this is two different tops which you've stitched together, right?
It's the top and a blanket that I stitched together. Yeah, so
that you wore throughout your pregnancy.
Yeah, so the you can see the circle on the left hand, very left hand image of draping fabric that was created through a 9-month stretch of wearing the top and being absolutely massive. And then when eventually he came out, the top just sagged and left, like just like my body sagged, and left behind this kind of mad absence of where a baby used to be. And then I thought, wow, that's saying so much already about where my body's been and what has happened so far up to this point. I'd like to use it as in its own right for the sags. And then it's a double-sided narrative. So one side's predominantly Jacob's marks of him running round in circles. I've got a little bit more space on the back for my say, and I've depicted a little bit more figuratively a rough play game we were playing where I got kicked in the face. So
hence the title. I mean, there's a double play in the title, obviously, but
so the double play is like, I felt a kick, like, oh, that kind of cute moment where you first feel your child in your body, and it's like, oh wow, that's really amazing. And then like the more kind of powerful reality of that, really feeling it in your face. And then you've got that physical reality of his actual footprint sewn above, and see just how big his feet are.
You know, I really thought that was your foot. It looks like such an adult foot.
Yeah, he had massive feet even when he was first born. So go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, what's the significance of you having stitched the two items together?
Oh yeah, so I wanted to create that double narrative of two things coming together, but for this one I didn't want to interfere with his marks, so they're kind of left as their own narrative, and then I have my narrative on the back, but so that it feels like it's definitely two conversations that are coming together to form a hybrid. And it's my desire to merge them together to create a hybrid. It's not his desire, but that's something I want to do, to bring us back together again from our separate experiences.
Okay. So these were the last works that you made before Jacob started at school.
Yeah.
So each is made up of 3 pieces of cloth which you've stitched together. And so it kind of has that idea of the exquisite corpse, the surrealist play. So can you talk a bit about that, maybe?
Yeah. So I love the game Exquisite Corpse, and head body legs, as we used to call it at home.
Yeah.
And the idea that that's made by numerous people. So the head might be one person, the middle somebody else, and the legs might be you again if it was two people playing. And I love that, like, the one person's been made by lots of different people approach or opinions of what this person should look like. But in this painting, each section's made by two people. And it was that act of coming back together again. So Jacob's going back to school, and I knew this would be the end of working in this way with him. And I wanted to make something about how I was feeling at that time. And I was very uncertain of myself and who I am as an individual person. And that was coming back to me, but I was different. So to reassemble the body like a Frankensteinian experiment to go, how does this fit back together again, this identity, was the challenge of the work. And yeah, to be broken but strong as well through that. And they're absolutely massive. They're monumental. Monumental celebrations of the body, and mother as a guardian figure as well. There I am in the...
That's just one section, so there's three of those.
Yeah. So
yeah. Sorry, I'm pointing at the screen, which obviously
I keep doing that. I keep doing that. Yeah. So they were made in these three separate time periods and then put together. So I didn't really know how they were going to fit together as well. And then, making in the chaos whilst Jacob slept. And then I was looking at the photograph and I thought, oh yeah, look, the pyjama bottoms are what I'm wearing in Ghost Mother in the first paint.
Stripy ones.
And then the top, which you can't really see, is another top, is the second doppel of the top that you just saw. So it's like, yeah, those are my clothes. There I am wearing them.
And when you when you put the three pieces of cloth together, your hands stitching them all. Why? I want to make your life easier.
Yeah, they took about 2 months to sew them together. And then the threads are really intricate and they sort of start to become part of drawing and work their way into the painting as well. And I wanted something that was really precious, this kind of repair, but also like a labour of love that's very time consuming, to put them together to show that it was worth spending the time to put them back together. And a slow speed of making compared to the very fast speed of making the paintings. So they don't just fall into being, a throwaway object that's been quickly made and then discarded, but they become really precious through that loving assemblage of them. And also they're quite intimidating in the scale. And so for those who are brave that go up to it will notice all this kind of very gentle and intricate information that's happening across the surface as well. Yeah.
So you've just talked about kind of having to re-find your own personal identity once Jacob had started school, and so this work was made around that time, obviously based on the Caspar David Friedrich, which is on the right here, and it almost seems like a flip of the kind of standard psychological discussion of the child having to separate from the mother and find an identity. It seems almost like you were having to separate from the child and re-find your identity. I mean, is this something that you think that all mothers go through, all parents?
I think so. Yeah, I think you end up being like constantly the protector, just like, oh, they might trip over that, might bang into that, might try and swallow that. Are they going to choke on this? So you're constantly looking out for physical threats or potential accidents. And then as your child grows into being more independent, it's like, oh, actually they don't need that level of care anymore, so I need to step it back and let them make their own mistakes and hurt themselves from time to time to learn maybe not to go so high or jump off a wall or whatever it is. But it is tricky, and on this day I was really nervous because he'd never scaled something so big. that he was going to fall. And not just that he was going to fall, but that I wouldn't get there in time to catch him if he did fall. So although it wasn't super high, to me it felt like Everest, you know. You might as well be on top of the world. And then watching that separation, and again, it's all these little moments of realization that he is, you know, that he doesn't need me to do that now. That he can have these adventures on his own and go into the unknown and experience his own world. And it just really reminded me of the Friedrich painting. So I thought, well, I'm going to make it as my tribute to this painting of looking into the void, you know, on a great adventure. Yeah, and he can have his own adventure.
I mean, it sounds like there's definitely fear attached to this.
Yeah.
What other feelings were kind of coming up for you? I mean, was there sadness at the sort
yeah, bit of sadness, and then the adrenaline, and then excited. I felt really proud that he'd made it to the top. I was amazed. Got to the top, and he was holding on with one hand. So yeah, it's like a strange mixture of emotions, and they tend to be the ones that I am attracted to in painting. So you've got maybe a handful of positive ones, a mix of positive ones, and then maybe a mix of not negative, but, you know, nervous ones, or anxious ones, or whatever it is. And then having them to come together so that you're down an absolute middle line and you don't know which way to read the narrative. And that's where I hope the work sits. So,
and I guess that's why then the viewer brings whatever they're bringing on a certain day and interprets it however positive or negative. Okay, so we're moving on to we've got a few slides where you're painting on handkerchiefs, and these ones belonged, I'm going to get all the family members right, these belong to your dad.
That's right. Yeah.
So first of all, what's the significance of the handkerchief?
So I love a handkerchief because we don't use them anymore, for a start. So they're kind of weird to look back on, because we're now on a catch it, bin it, kill it kind of, you know, situations, keep washing things and throwing them away. And the handkerchief isn't for that. It's to catch it and then keep it, you know, for the day, whatever it was. And then they're you know, working into that. It's like, oh, it's really disgusting. It could be tears or sweat or snot or a cough, definitely germs in there. And these bodily expulsions, but then they're really precious. It's like, don't forget your hanky, keep your hanky with you, you might need it. So they're weird extensions of what, not maybe what we're wearing, but what we have on our body. And then at this time, I had to always have tissues or blankets or things to mop the detritus of spillage and various other things happening with a small child. So I became really aware of holding these types of blankets. And then they're my dad's, and they were given to him by my mum's mum. Okay. So it's sort of a 4-generational history. So I remember my grandma buying them every Christmas, whether you needed them or not. Yeah. And then my dad always having them and licking them and wiping my face before school to get the toothpaste off, which I dreaded. And then here I am doing something quite similar with my child, probably things he hated me doing or will hate me doing in the future. So it's a kind of very obscure way of starting to think about this cross-generational narrative. Yeah. And then having my parent surround me and my activity, so frame how I'm behaving with my child.
We literally do frame as well with these particular ones, because they've kind of got, yeah.
And I had trouble with like an edge to a painting, and like, what does that mean? Why does it stop here? And why is it not a different shape? And that's bothered me for a long time. But somehow, because the edge is like coming inwards to the surface, I've got a false edge that I could then work outside of and get a little bit of slippage out of the frame. So that seemed weirdly okay, even though it's got much more edge than a normal painting would have.
Yeah. And also depicting quite kind of quotidian moments, if you like. So like clean his teeth and then going to bed.
Yeah. So these moments are like the either really quick everyday moments or over a longer period. And we do them without really thinking about them, but we change how we do them every day, and it shifts. And then thinking the teeth cleaning is going to be a very short period of time before he can clean his own teeth, but it's a really charged part of the day where you don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be a peaceful, non-eventful situation where you can just clean the teeth? Or we're going to have a big battle of the wills? Is there going to be a big tantrum? How's it going to end? So there's always this tense moment before that happens, as to how are you going to navigate this part of the day. And so again, that kind of tip in, is it okay? Is it just very nurturing, or is it going to end up being quite aggressive? We don't really know. On the left, and then the right hand one, the sleep tight's a slower, gentler moment of checking in at the end of the day, that your child's okay, that they're still alive and well and sleeping well, not falling out of bed, etc. And this particular day, he's completely covered up, and there's something really disconcerting about having the head covered and thinking, I associate that with somebody having died, the blanket over the face, and going back to those Victorian pictures again, like, oh God, what's happened here? Why are we not allowed to see the body or the head? And so there's that worry at that point that something's happened. So you have the comfort of the parent overlooking, but then why are we not seeing the next moment? Yeah. So it's
very mixed feelings.
Yeah, mixed feelings about that moment. And then the bedding's like a net, the check of the blanket. So it's a weird, and the parent being awake and the child not being physically present, so it's both very gentle but then disconcerting as well. Yeah.
Which you wouldn't necessarily get on first glance, but
no,
when you start thinking about it, actually, it's like, oh no, or it's all fine and I'm just overreacting, what's happening? And I think that again, as a parent, is something that you've got to kind of keep a handle on. It's like, is this going to play out okay, or do we have to let it play out badly? Or is that part of what you mean when you talk about the responsive parenting and the responsive painting?
Yeah. So you've got to go with it and then react. Be reactive rather than a dictator about how it's going to pan out. And
but you have the routine, or if you like, the rituals which you're trying to, but you can't predict quite how closely you're going to be able to stick to them.
Absolutely, yeah. So that routine is, it's definitely going to happen that day, but how it's going to play out, whether it will get abandoned, we don't know. And then they're so like drama filled, I was like, the walk to school yesterday was so full of drama. We were playing a game and there was tears and anticipation and excitement and reconciliation. And I thought, wow, we've just gone from this, 10-minute walk and we've had an opera, quite tired now. That was amazing. On the walk back. So they're supercharged, even though they're just, every day, and we forget as well. So they're like little keepsakes of those amazing crystallized moments, that we just kind of skip over and go, oh yeah, that used to be a really big thing that we had to do, and now I don't need to, I don't do that anymore. So yeah.
So these were painted on whose handkerchiefs are these? These were your
own mine.
And they're like completely different from the preceding paintings.
Yeah,
the material is different, right?
Yeah, the material's different, and they're much smaller as well, because they're little girls' handkerchiefs I got when I was like 6. And I used to wrap my dolls in them. I didn't understand what to do with them and why I'd want to carry a hanky around with me every day. So yeah, the excitement and the nervousness about working on them is they're super precious surfaces to me with a lot of personal history. but I can't practice making a mark on them. And so a gesture that might have worked really well on one of the paintings, I think, oh, maybe I'll start with that. That could work well for this image. Does something completely different on the surface, and think, okay, maybe it's a polycotton blend, or who knows what's happening. So that's quite exciting, to go with the flow of the paint and to learn it really quickly, how it's going to work on this very small scale. Mm-hmm. And that not wanting them to fail as well, because then I've lost the handkerchief. Yeah. So yeah, that's a kind of nice adrenaline way to start a painting. And then there are acrylic, and that sticks and stays on the surface. So that's its own little challenge. But I also work by hand washing and scrubbing them as well. Mm-hmm. So you get a stain of something that I've changed my mind with, and you have to scrub really hard to get it to go. But I think that's important too, because it's not just the coming of the event, but it's the going as well. So we're always in a transient metamorphosis of a moment between one state of being and another. And so the work should shift as well, like a ghost, between one event and another. It's never really fixed in our heads. We're always going somewhere else, or, you know, these, even though they're made close to the time they were experienced, there's still been 100 things happen in between. So it should feel like a little bit disheveled and only half caught.
Yeah. And you've also picked up, so the floral patterns that were on there, you've kind of picked up on and repeated them. So I mean, we're going to come on a bit more to the roots and shoots idea, but can you say a bit about what that means for you and how nature sort of interacts?
So nature's a great symbol for like a cycle of life, and the flowers as well being that at that moment that they're kind of reproducing, and then the flower dies, and then the seed grows, and off we go again. And I thought, you know, they're this beautiful symbol, but they're very fleeting as well, and associated typically with women. And I thought, well, let's utilize that, but have them cascade, you know, or show the next bit. So on the one, I'm pointing at the screen again, you can't see what I'm pointing at. On the one on the left, I've added a lot more leaves at the bottom, so there's been a lot of drop down to the next bit. And then the one on the right is the original flowers are embroidered, and I wanted to mimic the lean of the flowers with the lean of the figures. So it's a big flower and a little flower together leaning in the same way. And then the figure kind of grows out of the flower. But to point again to a nature cycle and a life cycle, that these things happen again and again in a anticipatory kind of way. So we can use that in the pattern, and we can use that with the flowers as well. And
this final set for the handkerchief picture, these were your brothers.
Yeah.
Phew. And I mean, the right hand one obviously has power play in the title, but I think both of them have got a sense of sort of power play within them. And I mean, to me, they kind of also echo those Victorian photographs again, with this idea of the mother being there but being invisible.
Yes, definitely very invisible on the left one. So I've used the same mark to depict the mother figure as the kind of architecture of the space, so that rudimentary wall and floor, and then no physical presence at all, just a silhouette or shadow. And in comparison, the child's very viscerally, much more physically present and more specifically described, with the hair and the shadows on the shoulder and things, and then the amazing rainbow trousers as the kind of the playful world that he lives in, compared to my more serious, like, can we just get changed now? on both. Let's just try and get this day moving along. And a bit of that on the right, that's kind of different approach. So having the world on its head, and seeing things from a totally different perspective, from one side of the image to the other, and then the feet being grounded and rooted in being a bit more sensible to the approach. And then the figure on the right could also be one figure kind of bent, flipped round and down.
Yeah.
Again, or like cut in half.
Exquisite corpse, but
yeah.
wrong, kind
yeah,
of.
Exquisite corpse gone wrong. This isn't attaching properly. You folded the page wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this one worked all the ways up as well. So it's like it could be a rotating painting as well. And then I'd forget sometimes which way up it was, because it's square.
Yeah.
But yeah, that vying for power. So which side of this topsy-turvy seesaw is going to come out on top? Yeah, I want to turn it upside down now. It looks like this way. Yeah, and then that being under described as well. So the environment's getting involved quite heavily. That kind of static in between, like a static on the carpet. So the tension is rising in the space in between, but there's not a resolve yet. But it could happen.
Yeah,
as it usually comes out good in the end. But yeah, not to close it down too much, so you get that it's a fast moment. Yeah,
I mean these pillowcases are a lot more serene, I guess, like quite visceral but quite tender, and I guess they make me wonder, like, about how you go about composing the compositions. That's a really bad structure, sorry. But are you just creating them in your mind, or do you have photographs that you're using?
So it's a blend, really. Yeah. Sometimes I'm lucky and my partner gets really heavily involved with documenting what's happening all the time, just in case it's useful for my art practice. So I have a mass of images that are just being quietly paparazzi'd as part of our everyday life. And then sometimes it's composite memories of the ritual, so like bedtime ritual or resting ritual, that feel like they should come together. And then I do a whole lot of drawing before I start painting, so I can learn the image and find what is it about this situation that I'm really attracted to. And then some don't make the cut. It's like third, fourth attempt, it's like, no, it's not what I hoped it'd be. And then the ones that I persistently want to keep reinvestigating are the ones that end up being paintings. And it's also a way for me to reduce down the information, because I'm very much a lot of information in my head at the same time, and so it's a way for me to quieten it down and just find those key points. So weight it out is the weight of the body on another body, and then the figure underneath is just disappearing into the background, but you get the heaviness. And then in telling the time, it's about how the heads come together, but the bodies are experiencing different things. So a slower fatigue from the adult figure, and then the kind of quicker cycle of experience in a more present state from the child. And again, I'm not sleepy, I don't want to go to bed moment. And then the borders have patterns that might be clues to how I was feeling or thinking about the painting. So roots and shoots on the wait it out, looking at a family cycle, and then a clock face around telling the time. So you can start to read the figures as a clock as well, if you want to.
Yeah. So this one got a great board. This was made during lockdown, and it has that slightly manic feel. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Needing to get out of the space that you're in, but why the leopard skin print? I mean,
well, yeah. So just feeling like it's getting out of control, and the space is becoming slowly trashed and going out of your mind, and you think this is the end of a civilized experience. Everything's stopped getting dressed in the morning, and it feels like things are starting to break down. And play is also breaking down a little bit to regressive play, and this play is skin to skin and being like back in the same body and needing that physical reassurance of being together, but a mad version. So like angry face. And I thought, oh, that wanting to feel or needing to feel wild or release that pent-up energy, and how you could think, well, I'll wear like a wild animal pattern and then I feel more dangerous, or you know, back in touch with my primitive roots. But it's very faux, so the blues like completely unnatural. It's like something we can't really get back to, even though we might crave it, or to be out in the wild and out in a free space. But everything's getting locked in, and becoming quite oppressive. And then the pattern itself feels like that to me, like it's lots of eyes or figures crowding in to the space and being kind of squashed into this squat situation in the house. But then maybe it's a protective thing again, and a guardian thing, like this totem of eyes being a protector of the outside space. And that way there's comfort and reassurance in the camouflage almost of being able to hide in the environment. Yeah
There's always kind of alternate readings, it seems, with your work.
And what
day of the week it is, or what feeling you've got when you come to look at it.
Yes, so yeah, ask me tomorrow, I might say something different.
This comes back to the idea that you touched on before of cross-generational, I can't even say it, cross-generationality, expanding out the relationship between you and Jacob. So you've got him in the bottom half, and then you, and then also your mother at the top. So it's kind of a tripartite relationship. Can you talk about that a little bit, and also how you're using the paint to kind of express this sense of time?
So it's I think it's quite a natural cycle to look backwards as well as forwards. And when I became a mother, it just, then you start thinking, well, what did I learn when I was from my mother? So when I was a child and she was my mother, and then what did she learn from her mother? So you become tied into a chain cycle, you know, like a daisy chain cycle of different generational roles. And so I felt like I was in the middle of this, both providing support for my child, but also taking support from my mother as her child, but also as as a guardian of motherhood. So she could advise me on being a mother because she'd mothered me, and my brother and sister. So so you get this lovely kind of like stacking back into a history. So Jacob's figure is the most viscerally present and kind of very physically applied, and his skin feels like sweaty and his hair's clammy, and you get that like he's a hot body moving around, but all the attention's in his head while he dreams. And then I have a little bit of that with the redness on the lips, and that really unattractive looking at the face and into the orifices. It's like an involuntary passing out moment of exhaustion, but less present, becoming more ghost and a little bit decapitated, so like away from my body. And then my mother figure in the background being the most ghostly and the least described of all, so regressing the most into the fabric and into the past.
And you mentioned before about this work being quite a good example of how the personal becomes more general, because everyone, despite not being you and having your experience, your son has experienced either being a mother or having a mother. So
yes, and I think that's really important as well, and that I think that's coming out more in the work, because although it's made from a really personal place of what I'm actually experiencing very specifically between me and my son. It doesn't actually matter about it being me and my son, just that it was a actual experience that was had by one person with another person. So the specificity of gestures, of features, becomes less and less, to give the viewer a bit more space to imprint their own narrative on, and not, oh, I'm looking at Mindy asleep, but like the mother asleep more.
Yeah.
And then it's quite hard in this talk because it might come out a little bit later on in the work that it was me, but it doesn't matter to start with that it was me. It's, you know, or if at all, if anybody ever finds out at all if it was me. But then it's like, well, I can't talk about how I was inspired by making the work without referring to me and him in the work. But yeah, it's not crucial. That's for the reading.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next work is a really quite complex one, and I know I'm going to leave it to you to say as much or as little as you want, I think, on this one.
Thank you. So I might maybe just start with the title, The Ventriloquist. And it was that idea of a child being able to take control of another inanimate object and be able to speak on behalf of another. So like a ventriloquist, talking with a dummy, and having a two-way conversation, but when it's just one person playing. So the kind of ghost shell figure is not responding or communicative because it's inanimate, but it's quite ghostly and strange, but also a toy. So we're kind of stuck in the middle viewing this piece of work, thinking, what on earth is happening and how is this going on? And like two cycles of life between a young child and then like a ghost shell of a figure as well, interacting and being this midway observer, and then being observed, or the guardian and the totem again of the wood grain. So the wood grain becomes eyes or blips in a lineage, watching us around the situation. And it's painted on a child's single duvet cover, which is the strangest proportion. So if you take it out, it feels like it's a single blanket, but it's not. It's squat, but it's big. So I quite like that. It's the wrong size. So say the child's becoming bigger and more independent and more grown up, or a grown up becoming less independent and more like a child. It's just this really nice in between scale that I thought suited the strange situation.
Liminal state.
Yes.
And I think this is one of my favourites. I mean, one of them, but it's so sort of got the sense of the transience and the fragility of life, but also it comes back to what we mentioned earlier about, you know, the roots and shoots and how the veins of the foot literally are running into the twigs on the ring. I mean, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, you've kind of got it.
Sorry.
On there. No, that's fine. But yeah, really looking at that transient nature between a life cycle of a body and the life cycle of plants, and I'm thinking, why is that? But I think we can take a lot of comfort from the life cycle of a plant because we see it happen again and again and again over a year, and then the life cycle of the body we might only experience a few times in close families, so it's a lot more alien to us. But the blossom, I think we're very attracted to blossom because it's so fleeting. It's only there for a few weeks and then it's gone, but it will be back. And using the idea of the petals and something really attractive, maybe to show something internal from the body, like blood cells or fleshy globules, which is maybe less attractive to think about. And then the twigs and the branches being like really similar to our capillaries. And then roots into things as well, into our history. So and then an ambiguous moment as well with the cool down. It's like, is it just we're hot when we're asleep or resting and need to just cool the body down and have a sneaky peek of the toes, just to get more comfortable? Or is it more the body is cooling down and this is at the end of the cycle? And we have no other clue as an observer, and no other interaction. So it's one of the few ones where there's no two figures to give you insight, and the interaction comes from observing the painting. So we are the other person in the image. Yeah.
And we're over time, but we're sort of coming up to the present now, which is quite good place.
Oh yeah,
a good place to be. And so these works have the introduction of jewelry, which is, I don't know, perhaps in place of clothing, but referencing again generations and bloodlines.
Yes. So I'll be brief, but to look at the bloodline and how all the hands are from different generations, and they're all made of the same stuff and very ghost-like, but then we remember or charge up with symbolism or personality traits through the individual jewelry. Mm-hmm. So and that could be in lieu of the person or the character, but and then wear it to take on some of the power of the previous wearer as well. And this being the jewelry's permanent metal compared to the temporary flesh, and something that could travel through a family line across lots of generations. And then the image on the right is a close-up of that moment from one generation to another. And I painted this just shortly after my mum died in Easter time. So it's a fresh bereavement. And I started working on paper because it's a really strong void. It has no history. It's just empty. And that's how I was feeling. And very fragile and intimate and quiet and sensitive work. And the paper's really shrill and holds things really accurately compared to working on cloth. And so it's sort of super sensitive to the sensitive moment. So that was helpful as well. And to leave as much information as possible so that it can remain as empty as possible at the same time. And
there is that sense of kind of moving apart, sort of losing contact perhaps.
Yeah.
The shadows.
Yeah, so the shadows become more and more active in the space of the loss of the physical presence, and then capturing some of the physical presence is a kind of very reassuring way to preserve some of that person and recall it. Yeah.
And I think this has a similar idea again with the sense of the strong sense of presence, but in an absence, in a void.
Yeah.
And again, you're working with the watercolor on paper, but that's a very unforgiving medium. So how did you manage to create this kind of this?
Yes. So it's painted all over in pink first, and then while it's wet, it's very quickly wiped away, so that you have that loss back into the absence rather than a given absence, but that an absence has been created. And then the rest of the painting is worked as it's drying, so 20 minutes in total to paint it, and just really pared down. And then lots of attempts to get that moment right and just very raw. Yeah, but it will take everything. So you've got my thumbprints around the edge as well.
Yeah, I think that's just such a beautiful image.
Thank you.
And so again, these are really recent, and they're still painted on paper, but you're returning kind of to earlier themes, perhaps of the roots, and bringing Jacob back in.
Yeah.
Just gone back to school after 6 months of being around all the time, so it's that sense of separation again.
Yes. Yeah, and that needing to be together, like coming together and pulling apart, and that, those two things at the same time, needing your own space as well. Needing some comfort together, but being maybe in your own world as well, and being in the middle of a cycle. So thinking about what's happened in the past, maybe as a weight, but also as a nourisher to kind of spring things forward into what's going to happen next. So they're quite transient paintings, and maybe a bit more daydreamy, and definitely not solidly based in a reality.
And also because they're on paper rather than on an item of clothing that has a history, as you say.
Yeah.
That they're springing from that void or that uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's, well, yeah, they're kind of disconnected, but really intimate, just kind of gentle time out kind of moments, really. Yeah.
And then so we've got one final work, which is great. You seem to be kind of drifting off into the distance or perhaps the future, but I mean, there's this amazing, vibrant ginger shadow.
Yeah.
Could you, why? What's that about?
So the most amazing presence is the shadow in it, and that vibrancy compared to the bodies. And the ginger is represents my mum, who was a ginger and was known as the Ginge. And so I thought it was this was a nice way. It's kind of like a wake painting to kind of celebrate her presence still being present even though she's absent through the shadow. Mm-hmm. And then being ungrounded, just this is new, this is a new experience, I don't know how to get a foothold or to move forward with it, so we're moving around but in a not very dignified kind of way, but it's happening, and just trying to find our feet again and navigate this new sense of selves and new family dynamic. Yeah. So that's where I'm up to.
Where you're up to. Brilliant place to move to see if we've got any questions. I'm going to stop the screen share just for a while so I can actually look in the chat box. Okay, we have I think it's a question/comment. Yeah. It looks like your colour palette has become more reduced or selective. So pairing colours together, blue and red, pink, green, black, etc. Could you tell us a bit more about this shift, please?
Yes. So just
to interrupt you, can I just remind everyone that if you have a question, now would be a good time to type it into the chat box at the bottom of the screen, please. Sorry to
that's okay. So the blue and red for me was really symbolic of how the blood moves around the body. So the red, like new blood, new life, kind of charged up and ready to go. So very positive forwards. And then the blue is at the other cycle where it's become deoxygenated and it needs to return back to the source to come back round. So they were two sides of the colour palette and two sides of the cycle. So warm and cool, old and new, travelling backwards and forwards round. And I guess that's what I was doing with the purple and green as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, are you still interested in motherhood? You're being asked.
Yes, I don't think that's
away. Just never fix. Like, right? Okay, done.
Goodbye. No, yeah, I think that's always going to be there. It's less dominant as the main thing because it's not the constant state of existence for me. So but it will always be wrapped in because that's who I am now. Yeah.
But you're yourself as well, so I guess finding yourself and your own identity beyond being a mother.
Yes.
But still recognizing that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you still making work with JB?
No. We stopped when he went to school. And I thought, well, leave it and let's see if he wants to make some more. But he didn't want to, he didn't seem to miss it, or when he's making it's finished when he's finished. So I thought that's fair.
You putting your dirty mark all over it.
Touch it because it's finished now. So yeah.
This is a good question. If you could collaborate with one artist from any time, who would it be and why?
Oh, no, I have actually been asked this before. And I thought of Cameron, the Victorian photographer. Do you know who I mean?
Yeah, Margaret Cameron.
Yes, because I think it's quite personal space, painting space. So apart from working with Jacob, I think that could get a bit awkward working with another painter. So we'd need to switch over into a different medium and collaborate across mediums. So if it could be any time, I think that would be really interesting.
So you'd have photographing and you'd put paint.
Yeah, and her the way she handles the negative is really painterly as well. Don't know whether that's accidental, but the fingerprints and the scratches and the hair marks, so it's got a lovely combo, and that would just be such a interesting person to meet and to chat with. So yeah,
and it actually really does fit with kind of your themes as well, I think.
Yeah, and the splicing of things together as well.
Victorian photography, I mean, not that she necessarily did those creepy children, but
no, but some of her work's really ghostly and strange.
Yeah.
So
we have lots of questions coming in, sorry. Have you thus made work about the relief or loss of working with JB, or how have you processed this change? Sorry, that's a follow-on from the Are You Still Making Work with Him?
Oh yes, so I think that the processing the change was moving on to working on a found surface, so I really missed his marks and I didn't know what to do with myself when I had all the options on the paintings. I have too many choices now. So the working on the handkerchief gave me a specific scale and palette and framework. So that's kind of helped ease me back into my own language. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer it?
Yeah. We'll get another question if not. You've spoken very eloquently as ever. I'm interested in how much written reflection you have completed alongside this fascinating body of work.
Yep, I write a lot about what I'm doing to find out what I am doing. What am I doing? And I've been quite lucky to have been interviewed. Well, not for a while, but like the end of last year, I was interviewed quite a few times, and that forced me to reflect on what's happening and why am I making the way I am. And it's a good practice to try out. And then again, prepping for this is like, okay, so what have I been doing? Why am I working on paper? Why is there a change? How's the work shifting? And then just ask yourself questions. So you know what to say.
When people throw things at you.
Yeah.
So given the complexity of all the ideas bubbling away, I was wondering how much the ideas are present as intentional planning for the work, how much happens in the working, and how much in retrospect? Ooh,
that is a very good question. I think sometimes I know ahead and I know why it's going to work, and that's great because I'm already really far into the idea before I start, and they're lucky days. And then other times it comes out through the drawing and I think, oh, I like this about it, and what is that? Why? Then why do I like this? Oh, this is increasing the tension of the dynamic here. Okay, so probably that's what this piece is going to be about. But then a lot of it does happen after, and go, what? When I look at this now, what do I think? What's happening? Yeah. But the watercolours I've just been making because I've wanted to. So I've only reflected on them really for this talk. So
good. Okay, a very quick question about bleach. Given the appearance and disappearance and the rubbing away of stains, have you ever used a harsher agent on the cloths?
No. I have thought about bleach, but then I'm worried it's going to damage the fabric because it will make it more brittle in the long term. They're already quite fragile, some of the surfaces. So if I can get away with just hand washing it, then that's what I'll do. Or putting it in the washing machine. Yeah.
Okay. This one's just an observation, really. Subject matter for the moment aside, it just strikes me how formally and technically striking, rich and innovative each piece of this body of work is. One can look and look and look and still find so much. Each piece is an education.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's lovely. I will save this chat for you so that you can.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you popping up as well, which, yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
That's kind of a nice point to finish on, unless there are any other questions. But I'm going to just screen share again, just so that people have got your. Oh, I need to go right back to the start for this.
Oh, no. We'll go backwards in time.
Website, yeah, backwards in time.
All part of the cycle.
Computer's not responding, obviously. Oops, yeah,
All right.
Down at the bottom there for people who want to know more. We're getting more comments saying thank you both, and we're very proud of Mindy at Imperial. There you go.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
This is actually the point at which, if we were all sitting in one room, you would be getting a huge round of applause. So I think we're going to do a virtual round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you very much. And also, yeah, thank you to everyone in the audience and for all the great questions as well. And thank you to anyone who watches on YouTube in the future. And they need to do it in the next few years in case you have to take it down.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Quick. Quick while it's all good.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, and thank you again, of course, to the Blyth Centre for Music and Arts for supporting this talk as well. Yeah, and there are heaps of thank you coming in now. Like I say, I will save that for you. Okay, and I guess I just have to basically kick everybody out now, which I hate doing, but thank you again, and thanks, Mindy. And
thanks, Anna. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, any final words? Sorry.
No.
Okay, I will just end the meeting then, but yeah, thank you everyone, and thanks, Mindy.
Thank you.